Welcome back to the Zone In podcast. I'm Sam Palmer with jpmorgan Wealth Management, and I'm your inside guide for today's episode. This time, Chase and Kayvon are talking to two former college athletes that have now found themselves on the other side of the playing field. One, who has built a company to help student athletes understand and navigate the ever-evolving NIL space, and one who has grown an empire by helping athletes stay in top shape. Stay tuned at the end of the episode because I'll dig it a little deeper into the financial side of things and share some resources that might help you start building healthy habits of your own. Now, let's zone in.
Welcome back for another week of the Zone In podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kayvon Thibodeaux, former Oregon Duck and now New York Giant.
And I'm Chase Griffin, quarterback at UCLA and two-time NIL Athlete of the Year.
And today we're joined by my mentor, longtime friend, and business partner, Thibodeaux Gaines.
And we're also joined by Michelle Meyer, the founder of the NIL Network. The NIL Network is a hub of information for anyone involved in the NIL industry. Travell, before we zone in, let's hear a bit about your background.
I don't really have a really impressive background. Once I kind of look at all the athletes that I'm really blessed to be around and train, and like I was a normal guy. I played high school sports, played Division I college, and unlike most athletes, I was a total dork in college. I was a triple major, got 3 degrees, and so I really wanted to go to grad school at Stanford, and so wasn't really a desire to play sports after college, but it was a desire to. I wanted to be a high school principal, but I wound up being a college strength coach. I had the opportunity to move back home to Louisiana and be around my family, and that's how I started working with athletes.
You mentioned that you wanted to go to Stanford. What would a grad degree from Stanford do as far as your vision for life?
I think a grad degree for me to go to Stanford was super important just because for me, that was the school that I went to San Jose State for undergrad. And I wanted to go to Stanford just because it wasn't necessarily about the book smarts. It was about being around a collective of smart people and people that were smarter than me. And I wanted that kind of, that environment where people can challenge me that were smarter than me and from different backgrounds to see where I really fit in at. So that's where I wanted to go to Stanford. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but I ended up having a pretty good life anyway. So, I was drafted in baseball. It was something for me that I saw my freshman year in college. I saw players that were seniors and they put their whole eggs in the basket of going pro. I wanted to really take my education serious so that if I happened to get a great job of going pro, that's awesome. But I want to prepare myself in life to be ready to be, just a productive member of society.
Now, Michelle, you were also an athlete, right?
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about your career in volleyball.
Yeah. So I played collegiately, UC Santa Barbara, ended up going overseas and playing in Denmark for a season professionally. When I came back, I didn't have that same vision to have a life beyond sports. So I got into coaching, got out to University of Hawaii to coach the beach volleyball program out there, was at Pepperdine and USA Volleyball, and really just started NIL Network in 2020 because we knew it was coming to college sports and not enough people were paying attention to it.
So, Michelle, we knew you were coaching, but how was that transition, seeing athletes, not get paid for so long and now have that opportunity? Like, what did you see, beyond that change?
Yeah, so that's something actually that really sparked my interest was when the Ed O'Bannon case got settled, and I think it was 2014. I was coaching beach volleyball out at University of Hawaii, and I thought, man, like my athletes would love to take advantage of their own name, image, and likeness. And I don't think necessarily they would have done it through social media endorsements, but even the opportunities for entrepreneurship and running camps and clinics and really using their own name would have been so powerful for them out on the islands.
Are you able to, with the NIL Network, provide these services to these athletes now?
Yeah, well, I spent the last year at San Diego State as their NIL coordinator. So I was really helping the athletes one-on-one there. They would come and meet with me. We would, all the way from the beginning, how do we create a brand and strategize about monetizing your NIL all the way to the other side of it of, looking at different contracts, what terms they can negotiate, and then finally, what can they do with the money they've made? What are taxes and Pell Grants and all that kind of fun stuff? Fast forward from 2014, when that case got settled, to 2019, California was the first state to pass the state NIL law that went into effect or was meant to go into effect in 2023. At that point, I was actually working on a project to build a strategic plan for the American Volleyball Coach Association to get beach volleyball added for men in college. Very deep in studying all the economics of intercollegiate athletics. And I went, okay, this is coming to college sports sooner than later. And I started talking to everyone who would talk to me about it. And fast forward that year, in 2020, not enough people were still talking about it. There wasn't a hub of resources, a place that people could go to understand all these changes that were coming definitely the following summer. And so really started NIL Network, as a passion project to try to just help out our athletes. There's almost 500,000 NCAA athletes and all their coaches and administrators and everyone understand what was going on.
Who at San Diego State is paying for your services in that position?
So that was through the athletic department. San Diego State, I think, was like the 4th or 5th university in the country to hire an NIL-specific role, which I thought was pretty innovative because they're not a Power 5 school. But they, posted that up. I'd already been living in San Diego for a couple of years, and I thought that getting in there and working with the athletes and really understanding the issues outside of the headlines would really, really help me with what I'm trying to do with NIL Network.
Michelle, so for all those out there, can you explain to us exactly what the NIL Network is?
Yeah. So really what I've been doing is pulling together a lot of different resources. So that's from different news articles to podcasts and recordings. I also have a lot of databases up there looking at, the space is still so new and startup heavy. I've found about 400 new service providers that are working in the space and partnering directly with athletes across, 10 different sub-industries with marketplaces and agencies and type of advisors. And so it's a place where athletes can go and filter through and find support to help them monetize their NIL. I also have different trackers up there for, the collectives and university-specific type platforms, university NIL programs, the type of resources they're pulling together, which is really starting to be utilized by recruits as it becomes more important in those type of conversations to understand how they can expect to be supported when they get to the school. So it is mostly just for autonomous, independent athletes to get on there and do their research and figure out, how to make this space work for them.
I never thought that the NIL thing was going to be real. So that's why I wasn't prepared like you. I didn't think it was going to be real. Kayvon kind of brought it up. I don't even think if you totally thought it was ever
I was
going
going to say, even touching back on the story about how we met, it started in a gym training, and it was me in high school, seeing just the opportunity and knowing that, okay, I'm not going to be able to try to reach my goals without putting in extra work. So we got together, and as we started on this journey, it was like, first, I think it was me. I told him what I want to do after football. I talked about, making sure I got in front of a camera, making sure I did the little things, but we can never get paid. So it was like all these different, if you go on YouTube, I talk about there's all these videos out of me, making and doing funny things or whatever it is. And it's like, there was no opportunity for compensation. But I think it was I'd say a month before it happened. It was like the first conversation that summer. Or was it 2020? Like you said, it was like January or July 6th.
Yep.
A month before that, we probably talked about it and said like, we will get to work. I don't know. What's your perspective.
Our strategy we had an interesting strategy. I sat down with Kayvon, and what I decided was he's a very organic person. He's very authentic, and I felt that he has to be real. He has to be him. So I think I've never met nobody like Kayvon Thibodeaux, just period. And so, we made a lot of decisions. He did not want to do anything that's going to have a negative effect on the Black community. So whether it was fast food, whether it was soda, whether it was anything that had a negative effect on his community, we weren't going to promote that. And I think at times, again, you got to understand he's a kid in college. There were 2 6-figure deals, one from a fast food place, one from a soda place that we had to walk away from because it was against his, what he believed in. But I think that, we came up with a very strategic plan. We came up with a very thorough plan and was able to really execute a lot of stuff. And the biggest thing that I'm very proud of for both of us, everything was organic. There was no cold calls. They were all relationships, and we were able to tell this story.
Just touching on that point, I think the greatest thing that Travell had taught me was in the NIL space and in creating a brand, right? Because we've all now seen that athletes are brands. So I had to realize that I didn't want to dilute my brand. And by doing that would be, saying yes to every company or taking the crumbs when we could just wait and say no and go to the Nikes and go to the different brands that are willing to, work with us.
There's so many different marketplaces in the space that a lot of these athletes are starting to dive into. And I would say that those are not necessarily the most meaningful partnerships, but they're still dipping their toe in and understanding a little bit about what these brand partnerships look like. Something that's been really cool for me to see with my background in beach volleyball is, after athletes play beach volleyball in college, if they want to pursue the professional tour, they're not getting paid a salary. And so they have to do a lot of these brand partnerships and sponsorships in order to travel around the country. Yes, if they finish top 10, they're going to make, some amount of money. Hopefully it'll pay for their trip, but it's not, a significant amount of money. They're able to make these connections with brands now while they're in college. And even though they're not going to necessarily, continue that same contract once they get into the pros or once they're pursuing that career, those relationships are there. And I know that quite a few beach volleyball athletes who graduated out last year are still able to continue those on. And it's just taking that extra thing off their plate as they're trying to get out in the world and hire their coaching staff, strength and conditioning, get down for training, schedule, all the stuff that was handled for them in college. At least one part is taken off their plate.
Now, Michelle, you talked about the importance of relationships in the space. And clearly, Travell and Kayvon have a great relationship. Kayvon, how did you go about building a relationship with Travell, not only as a mentor, as a trainer, but now clearly as business partners?
I think it starts with just, not being afraid, right? Not when I say afraid, we scare ourselves into not asking questions or being, too prideful to tell someone that we didn't know. So for me, every time I'd come into the gym, I'd either have a new question or a new idea or just something to talk about. One, because we're working out, two, because we're all, I'm gonna see you every day. So it's like you might as well exchange ideas. But I think the best part about what Travell was able to do was kind of put all of my ideas onto a picture, right? Because I would come in and I would say all these crazy things about what I want to be or somebody I want to be like, whether it be like Michael Strahan or, whoever it be. I told him that's who I want to be. And then he kind of broke down the steps. And we talked about it being like the steps to success, right? Because everybody has like that end goal, but we don't really know the things that it takes, whether it be the research, whether it be, even with us, it was like, I knew that I wanted to align myself with these big companies. And the only way to do that was to say no, right, to different deals I wanted to mold my brand into what it is today. So back then I had to sacrifice a lot.
Right. Now, Travell, you've evolved over the years. You trainer, mentor, now you're killing it in the NIL space. How do you remain credible in a space that's brand new?
I think for me, it's the constant. It's like Kayvon. It's funny because I learn as much as from Kayvon as he learns from me, or I probably learn more from him. But I think always just kind of evolve and kind of never put yourself in a box. Everybody has to keep growing. Everybody has to keep evolving. Everybody has to keep elevating. And I think that my biggest struggle when we started was when I was calling people like, Travell, the trainer? And it's like, I wanted people to take me serious, and I wanted people to take Kayvon serious, because you got to think about it. Kayvon does not play a premier position. He's not a quarterback. He's not a running back. He's not a wide receiver. He's a disruptive defensive end. And to paint that picture and get people to spend marketing dollars on a non-premier position is something that we had to do. And so it's all a learning experience and everything. And it's also, I felt that if Kayvon can do it, anybody who plays any position can do it. So I felt that he's the standard for kind of how you can brand yourself and market yourself not being a quarterback, or not playing football or volleyball or different sports. And so I hope I answered my question about me by jumping back to him. But
It's so great to see two professionals step in and give advice to young athletes in this complex world of NIL. One of the things they talked about is long-term planning. But creating a strategic plan is difficult and is not natural to us. There is this concept of present bias, where it's hard for us to plan for things that are far away in the future and that we're not emotionally connected to. One way to get around it is to reward yourself for good behavior. For example, in college, every time I paid off $200 from my credit card debt, I allowed myself to buy lunch from the nicer cafeteria. You have to figure out what that reward is for you, but we all need help in creating that strategic plan. And to find out how you can start your plan, visit chase.com/zonein.
so for Kayvon, what I did, because the biggest thing for me is I never wanted any issues. And so Kayvon had a lawyer that reviewed all his contracts. It wasn't me. He had a financial advisor that took care of all his money and collected the money. They did accounts receivable and accounts payable. And so there was never any chance for any funny business to ever happen into our business. And then again, Kayvon has a budget. He sticks to it. I'm not in his business. I just bring him in the deals. I don't manage none of his money. And so that's how we kind of rock. But, he can answer that. He's done a phenomenal job with his money. And I'll get to myself too as well.
I would definitely say, it's all about the people around you. For me, I always was curious and always asked questions. So when the time did come for when NIL was a thing, before we thought to go look at a deal, receive a check, we had to get, a lawyer. We had to go talk to a lawyer and go talk to a financial advisor just to get those conversations going. And then as that started to happen, now when contracts are funneled through, we have a checks and balances where everybody's looking at the contract, and then I get the final say, and then, we sign off on it. But just having, people, different sets of eyes, seeing the contract and having an understanding of what I wanted for myself, and we put it together pretty well.
It's really interesting because the team is so important, right? To put good people around you, people that you trust and that are part of that inner circle. And I think that's one of the things that, we're at San Diego State and working with the athletes there. It's hard to put that team together if you're not, top of the line athlete that's going to get these massive, 5-6 figure type endorsement deals. And so really, I think that that's still a struggle for a lot of athletes to understand, what kind of team to put around them, how to find those people to trust, how do they even pull that team in if they're not making that much money or whatnot. I think it's one of my top concerns because a lot of athletes right now are reading their own contracts and saying, this looks great. And they're getting pressured to return things right away when they should be taking this at least to parents or friends of family or somebody who actually has some legal eyes to look at it. It hasn't been happening once you get outside of, the top athletes.
Michelle, what would you say is your advice to not only athletes ascending from college, but athletes going into college as far as the NIL space?
Yeah, it's the high school space, I think, has really started to develop around NIL. Now, NIL is still prohibited in a lot of states for high school athletes to take advantage of, but I think a lot of high school athletes are at least looking up at it and starting to build a strategy, understand okay, how do I build my brand? How do I implement my values into what I'm showcasing out to the world? And so that they're much better positioned once they get to college to be able to then reach out to those brands and make some of these more meaningful deals happen instead of the deals throughout the marketplaces that are, we'll activate 5,000 athletes at one time, post this one graphic. So yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes because I think it's kind of growing. The industry is developing on one side and the athletes are coming up from the other to really understand what this whole picture looks like.
Michelle, I got a question for you. Where do you think the NIL industry is going? I'm asking because it seems like in 2021 we first started, it was like this kind of boom and there was a lot of big deals, and then now it's kind of seemed like it's kind of went down a little bit, or maybe, I don't know. Can you explain to where you think it's going?
Yeah, I'm again, most of my knowledge is from, the non-revenue generating sports and athletes outside of kind of those high-profile athletes. I think there's a huge opportunity at the local level for those athletes. The 99% of them that aren't necessarily known on a national level, but they are known within their community, within their college, the local restaurants. I think it would be a no-brainer. But the problem with the local market right now is they maybe have never engaged in the influencer marketing industry before. And they don't have a massive budget and they don't have personnel to work through all the rules that we're playing by right now. I still think we're probably 4 to 5 years away from the local market really catching up to speed and then really starting those kind of meaningful partnerships. At the other end, I guess, with all these collectives that have popped up, and now collectives are kind of these new business types. They function as agencies in some regard, but they really are sourcing opportunities for athletes of a particular institution or university. I don't know where those are going. At this point, I think there's over 300 of them that have just started from the last year and a half. Power 5 in itself has, I think, 200 of those, which averages a little over 3 per school if you divide it out. I think there's going to be some consolidation there, and we'll see what the NCAA does if they change any of those rules moving forward, because there's a little bit of shenanigans going on right now.
At San Diego State, what were your interactions from the athletic department with collectives?
So actually, I left San Diego State at the beginning of January. We have 2 collectives at San Diego State that both launched at the end of 2022. It's an interesting dynamic, I think, between the athletic department and the collectives, and not just at San Diego State, but across the country, because these collectives are doing a great job in the recruiting space, right? And so football coaches and basketball coaches, they want to have those collectives be successful and to raise a lot of money and even to make the headlines so that recruits look up and go, oh, I'll, have some opportunity once I get to that school. On the other end, then the athletic departments are giving up a lot of their control and power, potentially some of the money that would have gone to their development department. I know corporate sponsorships as well is going, are they instead going to go, leave a corporate sponsorship opportunity at the university, instead going to, 10 athletes or something like that. So,
not to cut you off, but when you say collective, who is that made up of?
yeah, so collective has been kind of this catch-all word that started with the Gator Collective. University of Florida was essentially a business, new entity that was started by an alumni booster, super fan of the school and the program. So what those are made up of, there's a couple different ways that they function, but really they are fundraising money or even bringing in brand deals, depending on their model, and really just getting money to athletes for either nonprofit type events where the athletes have some kind of commitment every month or a few every month. But yeah, they're specific to the school, which no one really saw coming.
I think collectives are really interesting. And I think sometimes they pull away from the brand deal side of it, especially with media. Of course, with these collective deals, they're 6 and 7 figure deals. So the media attaches to them and they sort of don't focus on the deals done between brands and student athletes. And what you're going to see, and what Travell was alluding to, is there is a little bit slight dwindling in the number of deals that are coming from brands. And there's an increase in collective deals. At the end of the day, I think the main driver of collectives is recruiting. And like Michelle said, it sort of takes the NIL marketplace from being an equal opportunity game to focusing it on 5 to 10 recruits a year, maybe in 1 or 2 sports. You talked about 3 collectives at a school. What happens when all of the NIL management and focus is on those 3 sports when there's 23 other Olympic sports there?
I think one thing we can't, leave out is the player side of it, right? Where the students and the student athletes have to understand that we can't all fall in line. We can't all represent the same company and the same thing. So we have to be mindful and purposeful with how we brand ourselves and make sure that we find a unique niche, right? And not just follow the next trend.
Travell, obviously you said that Kayvon is special in his mindset regarding money and his vision for business as a whole. What conversations do you have with each one of your clients and mentees as far as what they want to do with their money?
Ooh, great question. I think that everybody's so different. There's some athletes that, they have different goals. So the thing that I always tell all the athletes, to make sure you save your money, make sure you put yourself on a budget, but also make sure that you get some things that you've always wanted. And I think if you get that out in the beginning, that kind of really goes away. But I think the biggest thing to tell people is to make sure that you have the proper representation around you, people that you trust and people that believe in your vision. And that's the biggest thing I tell everybody, whether you think you're a smaller athlete or a bigger athlete, have people around you that believe in your vision, that believe in you, and also that aren't afraid to tell you the truth. And I think that's how it's going to really work and manage all expectations.
Now, Michelle, at San Diego State, you had a little bit of a bird's eye view where you were seeing entire departments of athletes. What were the expectations going into NIL, and how did you have conversations managing these expectations? And then once these athletes had success, how did you go about pointing them in the right direction?
Yeah, I think it was very interesting because, as we all know, on July 1st of 2021, it looked like just crazy headlines everywhere. And I think a lot of athletes, even across the country, were going like, where's my NIL deal? Like, I don't understand. How's this not happening for me? And something I really try to drive home with the San Diego State athletes is it is work. Like, it is a part-time job. It's something that you can control your own hours, which makes it available for student athletes to do because they are full-time students and then full-time athletes. But you have to expect that you're going to be putting something forward, whether that's intentionally working on building your brand and who you want to be beforehand that positions you really well, which is what I was kind of saying with the high school athletes that are doing right now, or just being proactive. And like I mentioned about the local market right now that hasn't developed yet, athletes can be proactive and do some of that outreach, talk to the local restaurants around town about why they would do this, what kind of ROI they can expect. It is a lot. It is a lot of education that's needed on both sides still. But I think really I try to tell athletes right now, like, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, be proactive, but also take your time. And kind of going off of what you said here, building that trusted circle is like, if somebody's pressuring you into getting a contract back right away or to doing this by this exact time, guess what? That's a big red flag.
Right.
And if they want to pull it off the table, like, you should just walk and let it go at that point.
And that's all the time we have for today. I want to give a big thanks to Travell and Michelle for coming through and dropping some knowledge. And I'm Kayvon Thibodeaux.
I'm Chase Griffin.
And this has been Zone In, where we plan to take you from a student today to big time tomorrow.
Michelle and Travell gave us some great insights on brand alignment, knowing your worth, and financial pitfalls to avoid as you get started. Financial planning isn't easy, and navigating the markets by yourself can seem difficult. We have you covered with the latest on market trends, research, and financial planning. Visit us at chase.com/zonein to sign up for our newsletter. And make sure to tune in to the Zone In podcast next week. I'm very excited to join Kayvon and Chase in person. Together, we will wrap up the season with what we've learned from our guests and how you can apply it to your own life. I think that one of the things that we've learned through the conversations that we've had is that the lessons and the themes that have gone through are applicable to anyone.